Hello everyone, welcome to another audio session with me, CA Preeti Aggarwal. We are revising the entire CA Foundation Business Law syllabus through these audio notes. Now, these notes will help you to recall the concepts. You can listen to them unlimited times. You can just put in your headphones and keep on listening to these notes so that you remember all the keywords, sentences, the head points, and all this will definitely help you in exam. In my earlier session, I finished the first unit, which covered essential elements of a valid contract and offer acceptance. Now we are going to discuss another very important element of contract, which is consideration. These are my business law notes. It is my book for CA Foundation Business Law. You can purchase it from my website capreetiaggarwal.com. This book covers all the concepts in simple, easy language with many examples given for every concept. We have also given questions after every concept to give you an idea about the kind of questions that are asked in the exam. We also have another book, that is the CA Law Compiler, which is a detailed question bank covering all the past exam questions, study material, RTP, MTP questions with answers as expected in exam. So today let us discuss the concept of consideration. Now, consideration means something in return. This is one very important chapter for theory questions in the exam. Now, in CA Foundation, students are always concerned about the kind of questions that will be asked in the exam, whether a theory question is asked or a case-based question is asked from a particular chapter. This is one chapter from which you will be asked theory questions. So the entire chapter is very important for exam. You have to learn them, even on essential elements of consideration. Although it is a very lengthy answer, but they ask it for 6 to 7 marks, and your answer will go for around 2.5 to 3 pages. So you have to learn everything. You can write one example if you want for important points, and just a theory for other not so important elements. But please manage your answer well. Alright, now what is the meaning of consideration? Consideration means something in return. This is the most important element of a valid contract. No consideration, no contract. The Latin phrase also says that an agreement without consideration is void. No consideration, no contract. If you're not going to get anything in the contract, it's of no use. Consideration must be present for both the parties, and it can be anything of value. It need not be adequate. So these are all the essential elements of consideration which are given in the definition as well as in the introduction itself. The word consideration is divided under section 2 clause D of the Contract Act. Now this section number is important. The definition is also important for exam. You need to learn the definition. Although it appears to be very lengthy, the definition is very easy. When at the desire of the promisor, it shows that consideration must move at the desire of the promisor or the request of the promisor. But it may be given either by the promisee or any other person. Now, how will the promisee give consideration? So, the promisee or any other person has done or abstained from doing anything. So, it means that there is past consideration. So, at my request, the promisee is not doing something. So, that is past consideration. Or he does or abstains from doing something. That is present consideration. Or he promises to do or abstain from doing. It means it is future consideration. So, the kind of consideration is covered in the definition itself. So we have past, present and future consideration. And such act or abstinence means not to do something. This is the negative aspect of consideration. So an act or abstinence is called consideration for the promise. Now there must be consideration for both the parties. We can have positive consideration as well as negative consideration. Now positive means to do something, and negative consideration means not to do something. Like we have very good examples given in the textbook. To sell a flat, that is a positive act. I am promising to do something, but promise not to file a case, that is the negative aspect of consideration. So here, if you pay me 1,000 rupees extra, or if you pay me the amount in 2 days time, then I will not file a case against you. Not to do something, that is the negative aspect of consideration. Consideration need not be just benefit to one, loss to the other. It can sometimes have loss to both. So consideration basically means benefit to one party and loss to the other party, but it can have loss to both. Benefit to both is not possible, because if both are gaining, somebody has to lose consideration. Now in this case, let's say that X promises to sell 100 cans of juice to Y for 10,000 rupees. X is promising to sell 100 cans of juice, and Y is promising to pay 10,000 rupees. So what is the consideration for X? 10,000 rupees. And what is the consideration for Y? 100 cans of juice. Both are getting something in return. It's a valid contract. But if both decide to contribute rupees 25 lakhs and purchase the flat of Z, both are contributing, both are giving something. This is a loss to both. This is also consideration. Consideration need not mean money only. It can also include services. See, we want something in return. It includes services. It can also include goods for goods, that is barter exchange. Consideration also includes forbearance. Forbearance means not to do something. So that is also, you use any word, you use abstinence, you use forbearance, you say not to do something, all that is consideration. After this, let us quickly go through the essential elements of consideration. This can be asked as a theory question, 6 to 7 marks. The first essential element is that consideration must move at the desire of the promisor. With must, you will always write promisor. Must move, it means that the act forming consideration must move at the desire or request of the promisor. Any act which is done voluntarily or at the request of the third party will not constitute valid consideration. So the act must be done at the desire or the request of the promisor. There is a very interesting case law over here, Durga Prasad versus Baldev, although it's not important for exam, but yes, you can just mention the name. Now, A's house is on fire. B, who is his neighbor, helps him to extinguish the fire. Can B claim remuneration if he acts voluntarily? No, because he has not acted at the request of the promisor. But what if he acts at the request of A? Can he claim consideration from A? Yes. If B acts at the request of some third person, can he claim remuneration from A? No, because he has not acted at the request of A. The next essential element is that consideration may move may move either from the promisee or any other person. It means that it can be supplied, it can be given either by the promisee himself or any other person. There is one very important case law over here, Chinnaya versus Ramaya, and that also establishes the principle of stranger to consideration. I have a detailed YouTube video on this concept, so please go and watch that video. It explains stranger to contract and stranger to consideration along with the case law Chinnaya versus Ramaya. So please go and watch that video. Then we also have the third essential element, that consideration need not be adequate. Very important for case-based question. Consideration must be something in return. That something can be anything of value. It may seem inadequate, it may seem adequate, it may seem inadequate. See, inadequacy of consideration will not make the contract void. Now, I want to sell my car worth 5 lakhs for just 5,000 rupees. Nobody can stop me from selling it only for 5,000. My car, my wish. 5,000 also has value, right? You cannot say that how can you sell a car for worth 5 lakhs only for 5,000 rupees. It is my car. It is open to both the buyer and seller to fix the price. Inadequacy of consideration will not make the contract void. But yes, inadequacy will be considered as a piece of evidence to show that the consent was not free consent. So let's say, for example, X coerced Y to sell his flat for 5,000 rupees. Now, if coercion was used, Y can use this 5,000 as a piece of evidence to show that the consent was not free consent. Only at this time we will use inadequacy of consideration. Otherwise, inadequacy will not make the contract void. Law only requires the presence of consideration. The next essential element is that consideration must be real and not illusory. Illusory means imaginary. It only looks like consideration, but actually it is not real consideration. So consideration must be real. It must be of some value in the eyes of law. Consideration is not real when it is uncertain. Uncertain means that it only looks like consideration, but it is not real consideration. Now, X promises to cut grass for Y and Y promises to pay some reasonable remuneration. Now, what is reasonable? That is not clearly mentioned over here. The amount must be certainly mentioned. Only then it will be a valid contract. But here, because it is only reasonable, it is vague, it is uncertain, it only appears that there is consideration, but there is not actual consideration. This will not be a valid consideration. It will not create a valid contract. Consideration must not be illusory. It must not be imaginary. It must not be unreal or misleading. Now, P wants to get his car fixed, so he goes to a mechanic. Now, mechanic and he says that I will pay you 1,000 rupees for repairing my car, but only if I feel like. Now, in this case, even though there is consideration, 1,000 rupees, but if there is no certainty that he will pay, P says that I will pay only if I feel like. This only looks like consideration, but actually it is not consideration. It is misleading, it is deceptive. It's not a valid consideration, not a valid contract. Consideration must not be physically impossible to perform, like putting life in dead wife, bringing a star or moon from the sky. All that is legally impossible to contract. That will not be valid consideration. It only looks like consideration, but it is not. So A promises to put life in the dead wife of B, and B promises to pay rupees 2 lakh. What is the consideration for A? Dead wife. 2 lakh rupees. And what is the consideration for B? His wife. Yes. So in this case, although there seems to be consideration, but is it valid consideration? Is it really? Is it physically possible? No, it's not a valid contract. It is legally impossible to perform the contract, like entering into contract with a guardian for marriage of a minor. That is legally impossible to perform. Although it looks like there is some consideration, but it is not valid consideration. Then we have time. Consideration may be past, present, or future. Past consideration is a consideration which has already moved before entering into the contract. So A in January teaches the son of B, and then at B's request, and then B in February promises to pay him. Now in this case, the act of teaching is already over, then B promises to pay. So in this case, A has already performed his task, and only B needs to perform his obligation of paying the money. In this case, there is in the contract that is promised to pay, there is consideration for just A. There's no consideration for B. He has already received it in the past. His son was already coached in the past. This is past consideration. But the most important provision over here that you need to remember is that past consideration must move at the desire of the promisor. If A on his own teaches B's son, then can A claim money? No. Only when he acts at the request of B, he can claim money. Now B found A's cow at A's request. Then A promises to pay him 500 rupees as reward. Over here, since in the contract and the promise only B is receiving consideration of 500, it will still be a valid contract because it has moved at the request of A. So this is past consideration. Then we have present consideration. Present consideration is a consideration which moves simultaneously along with the promise. So A delivers a book to B, and B promises to pay in a future date. In this case, A has already delivered the book, but B promises to pay at a future date. It is present consideration for B. What if A delivers the book and B also pays at the same time? Then it is an executed contract. It will not be considered as present consideration. In present consideration, one party has performed his obligation and the other party promises to perform it in the future. Okay, contract has been entered. See, in past consideration, the contract only was entered after the act was made. Here, at least you are entering into the contract. You are entering into a contract, and in the contract, one party has performed his obligation, but the other promises to pay it in the future, perform in the future. Then that is present consideration. If both have already performed it, then it's an executed contract. Future consideration means both will perform their obligation in the future. Then we have that consideration must not be something that the promisor is already bound to do. Like X promises to pay 5,000 rupees to the policeman to investigate into a crime. Even if you don't pay 5,000, the police will still investigate into the crime. This will not give you any additional benefit, or it will not cause any additional loss. This is not valid consideration because the policeman is obligated to investigate into the crime. A promises to pay 50,000 rupees extra if the lawyer wins the case, but it is already the obligation of the lawyer to win the case. That 50,000 rupees is not going to change his obligation. That is not valid consideration. So consideration must not be something which the other party is already bound to do. Consideration must not be illegal, immoral, or opposed to public policy. This is the last essential element. Your consideration must not be something which is illegal, that is forbidden by law. It should not be immoral, that is against the society, against our values, our systems, our upbringing. Like X promises to pay 10,000 rupees to Y to beat Z. Now beating is unlawful. That is not valid consideration. A gave house on rent to a prostitute. That rent will not be valid consideration because the giving house to rent on rent to the prostitute for knowingly that she's going to use it for the activities, that is not considered. It is considered immoral. So that rent will not be valid. But yes, can you evict that person from the house? Yes, because you're the owner of the house. So in this case, if you are giving the house on rent and you know that the person is going to use it for immoral purpose, then that will not be a valid contract. X promises admission to Y in a college and Y promises to pay 1 lakh rupees. It is opposed to the society because you're promoting bribe. The person who deserves it will be left behind, and the person who's ready to pay money will get admission. This is against the deserving candidate. It is against the society. This will not be a valid contract. So students, these were the essential elements of a valid contract, and we quickly went through them. It was a quick revision, and I hope you were able to recall all the concepts. I have discussed many examples with you. You will find all these examples in the book, and you can purchase this book from my website capreetiaggarwal.com. In my next session, I will discuss the next part with you, that is stranger to contract. We will also discuss the case law Chinaya versus Ramaya. I will revise it in case you have not gone through the YouTube video, but I strongly advise you to go through the YouTube video to get clarity on the concept of stranger to contract and stranger to consideration. All right, so let me wind up the session now, and I will see you in my next audio.